The Baltimore Ravens fall to the New York Giants 24-20 in disappointing fashion in Week 6. We talk about everything that happened in the game and more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we've returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in today, making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes over on YouTube as well. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. And we are back here. The Ravens fall to 3-3 in Week 6 as they lose to the New York Giants 24-20. And once again, as we have talked about after the Week 2 loss to Miami and the Week 4 loss to Buffalo, a collapse. Baltimore and each of their losses has utterly collapsed. And we'll talk about it here today. We'll get into the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, and then really what soul searching the Ravens have to do, where they go from here, changes that they might or even must have to make, and more. So there's a lot to talk about today. I appreciate everybody tuning in, especially after a loss. I know it can be tough to listen to stuff for the week after a loss. I've been there before. Now I have to do content about it for 5 days a week, I guess 7 leading up to Sunday if you include written content. So we're going to talk and be honest about a lot of things. We're going to take away positives, but we're going to talk about the negatives. We're going to do both. We're going to be level-headed and really have honest conversation. I'm going to try my best to do that here today, as I try every day. If you want to support the show, support the channel, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow along with us in audio form as well. It helps out a ton if you want daily Ravens content 5 days per week. We are here for you. And also follow me on Twitter at KaleTrucker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. But let's talk about this game here again. 24-20, the Ravens lose. And really, we have to start the conversation with Lamar Jackson. Now, over these past 3 weeks, Lamar Jackson has not been great. And he's had moments, obviously. I mean, this is not like Lamar Jackson, every single play has been bad. And I also want to preface this by saying just because Lamar Jackson has been bad, or I'm saying he's having bad performances, does not mean I don't believe in Lamar Jackson. Does not mean Lamar Jackson's not a great quarterback, but he has not played well, particularly well, especially for Lamar Jackson's standards. What we saw over the first 3 weeks in this game in particular against the Giants, 17 of 32, 210 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And I know the key sequence everybody's going to be looking at, and I'm looking at it, it literally changed the tide of the entire game, was the 3rd and 1 successful quarterback sneak. But there's an illegal formation penalty, so you have major flashbacks to all the problems they had with that in 2021. And then the next play, there's a bad exchange between Tyler Linderbaum and Lamar Jackson. Jackson goes back to get the ball and is on the run, and inexplicably, honestly, instead of throwing the ball out of bounds, which he 100% should have done, and we've seen him be better in those situations this year, but he should have thrown it out of bounds. What he decided to do instead was throw a crossbody ball to Patrick Ricard, was the intended receiver, I believe, when there were 2 Giants around him, and the ball goes right into the hands of a Giants defender, the Giants' first interception of the year. The ball obviously is returned deep into Baltimore territory. The Giants score, and then, the Giants are up by 4 at that point, and you say, all right, you know what? Hey, go out there and win this one, Lamar. Go out there and prove this and prove that. Second play of that series, I think it was, he gets stripped, and the game effectively pretty much ends there. So 2 key turnovers in key situations for Lamar Jackson, and something just over these past 3 weeks, I don't know what it is. It feels off. If anybody has any idea, I'm more than happy to listen to what you might think it is. But something just feels a bit off. I know there's been conversation about, Lamar didn't accept the contract. And the last thing I want to do right now is talk about this contract situation, as we talked about it for so long. But people are saying, the contract, and Lamar is trying to establish himself more as a passer this year. He's not taking rushing lanes. And look, there have been situations this year where absolutely, I think that, there's been an open rushing lane, and Lamar Jackson has looked to do something else with it, kind of move around in the pocket. And he does that well sometimes, but it just feels like there has been a drop off from Lamar Jackson these 3 weeks. And look, I mean, the Bills, the Bengals, and the Giants are the three opponents that Baltimore's played in the past 3 weeks. They've obviously gone 1-2. I have the splits up from each of those games. Against Buffalo, he has 144 yards. Against Cincinnati, 174, and against the Giants, 210. Those are the three lowest passing totals of his year compared to what he did weeks 1 through 3, which was 213, 318, and 218. So he's kind of in this situation right now. And if you want to look at the quarterback ratings for each of those, the ratings in the last 3 games have been 63, 71, 71. The 3 in the first 3 weeks were 98.3. You had 142.6 and 110. So there has been a drop-off in Lamar Jackson's play. And again, it doesn't mean he's not a good quarterback. He is. But it's okay to say, hey, Lamar Jackson didn't do this particularly well this game, or he didn't do that particularly well in this game. You know, he's able to be praised about so many things. And I on this show, I'm a big Lamar Jackson believer. Just because he's had a down stretch does not change that fact. But, you know, you look at him, he impacts the game in so many ways. He did impact the game on the ground. On Sunday, he had a decent game, 7 carries for 77 yards there. With those Lamar Jackson jet sweep fakes up the middle, they're first down almost every time, it feels like. But this really was the Kenyan Drake game of all people. You have Kenyan Drake just having the game of his life, 10 carries, 119 yards, and a touchdown. So shout out to Kenyan Drake. J.K. Dobbins, 7 carries for 15 yards. After really saying all week that, you know, I haven't gotten 15 carries in a game in my career. And he seemed very, I guess, upset about the fact that he wasn't getting carries. And John Harbaugh explained what happened with Dobbins. He said the knee tightened up and just couldn't go. And this does probably have to do with some of the MetLife turf stuff, which is just terrible, by the way. The grass fields for all is my opinion on that. But that was a situation where I thought that if Dobbins was fully healthy, I think the Ravens would have given him a lot of carries. But Kenyan Drake was the hot hand. The MetLife turf had something to do with it. Dobbins in the knee, you don't want to risk it. So that's what happened with J.K. Dobbins. And now we'll talk about this fact in the third segment a little more. But the Ravens pass offense receiving wise, the Ravens receiving offense is all Mark Andrews right now. It is all Mark Andrews. I have splits up. We'll talk about the box score first. In this game, Mark Andrews had 7 catches for 106 yards and a score. A typical Mark Andrews game, 11 targets. He played well. He did have a touchdown. The touchdown, I guess you call it a drop, that deflected off of his chest, but the ball was tipped. So I'm not putting that all on Mark Andrews. It was deflected. The ball path was altered a little bit. But again, probably a play he could have made. But again, that aside, the splits that I have here, Mark Andrews, I mentioned, 7 catches, 106 yards, and a touchdown. Everyone else who caught a pass, 10 catches, 104 yards. Again, 7 for 106 compared to 10 for 104. If you want to go deeper than that, I also put out the position-by-position splits. The Ravens tight ends, 11 catches, 157 yards, and a score. The wide receivers, 5 catches for 45 yards. Kenyan Drake, 1 catch for 8 yards. So the tight ends are obviously dominant in this offense. I think that's what a lot of people were expecting. I just don't think we were expecting it to this degree. The Ravens missed Rashad Bateman a whole lot. Devin Duvernay didn't make an impact in this one. Tylan Wallace, not really. James Prochet didn't have a catch again. It seems like that is coming to a close. Who knows what's going on with James Prochet? He's talented, but he's not getting on the field and not doing much. So this is a team that has a lot of soul searching to do. And the fact of the matter is, in the second half, and especially a point I want to get across, is the red zone offense has to be better. It has to be. The Ravens in this game, and we've talked about this for multiple weeks, the Ravens in this game went 1 for 3 in the red zone. You cannot sacrifice touchdowns for field goals in the red zone because things like this happen, where you put yourself in a situation where you can lose a game, and it's all bad because you're giving up points in that situation. The Ravens gave up 8 points in that situation, and obviously Justin Tucker missed a field goal. Didn't feel real, honestly. Whenever Justin Tucker misses a field goal, there's always like a state of shock. That's like, did that really just happen? Because he's been so reliable. But again, the Ravens the red zone offense has to be a lot better. The discipline has to be a lot better as well. Penalties killed the Ravens in multiple aspects. We talked about the illegal formation penalty that honestly changed the entire, it did. It changed the entire tide of the game. The Ravens convert on that 3rd down and 1. They honestly, I thought, could have probably run that clock out and won the game right there. Instead, obviously, what happened, but there were multiple false starts, 2 on Patrick Ricard, 2 on Morgan Moses. Moses does leave the game with a heel injury. Luckily, everything seems to be okay with him. The Ravens were just being cautious by not putting him back in the game in the second half, which I think that was a fine decision. I agree with that decision and kind of lines up with what they've been doing this whole year. But the offense in the second half, I mean, if you want the splits, the Ravens scored 10 points in the first half and 10 points in the second half, but it just felt like the offense started to stall on third down. The Ravens went 4 of 10. Also, on the 2 failed red zone possessions, the Ravens didn't really run the ball, I think, as much as maybe I would have liked to see. You have the Ravens with first down and goal at the Giants' 5-yard line, I believe it was, and the Ravens passed 3 times when Kenyan Drake was clearly just on fire in the game. Like, this was a Kenyan Drake that I'd never seen before, and he was doing his Kenyan Drake thing, his Barry Sanders thing, obviously. And the Ravens didn't go to him in that situation. So I think play calling in that situation has to be better. Just a lot of things have to be better. But again, shout out to Kenyan Drake for the game he had. Shout out to Mark Andrews. I thought the offensive line played decently well, all things considered. And yeah, it's disappointing because the Ravens had the game right there. And then it was building up, I guess. And then a couple plays back to back in a sequence just really killed all momentum there. So we'll continue diving into the offense a bit in the third segment. But coming up here in our second segment, we're going to be talking about the defensive performance for Baltimore, how they're actually able to hold Saquon Barkley in check relatively and more. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Nugenics. And sometimes getting older can change your body. Sometimes you might be getting a bit of that dad bod, and it's not your fault if you feel like you can't get in shape. As men age, bodies naturally lose free testosterone, otherwise known as the man hormone. It happens to every man. It can make it feel more difficult to stay in shape and be energetic or active. And if you want more energy to counter the negative physical effects of aging, Nugenics Total T Testosterone Booster with Testofen will help you turn back the clock, re-energize your workouts, get you better results at the gym, and help you look and feel like the man you really want to be. Nugenics Total T contains man-boosting key ingredients like Testofen has been validated in 5 clinical studies showing to boost free testosterone levels in men. Because Nugenics Total T boosts free testosterone, the aging process robs, you'll feel stronger and leaner with more energy and more drive. So get a complimentary bottle of Nugenics Total T when you text NFL to 231231. Text now and get a bottle of Nugenics Thermo, their most powerful fat incinerator ever, with key ingredients to help you get back in shape fast. Absolutely free. Text NFL to 231231. Again, text NFL to 231231. Messages and data rates may apply. Terms apply. Available at nugenics.com/terms. And I want to tell you a bit about AG1. Our next partner has a product that people use every day, and I take AG1 because I wanted to get better health, more energy, optimize immune system as well. And so what's in the stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. The special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy recovery, focus, and aging. And it's lifestyle-friendly, so whether you eat vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, it can be the thing for you, and it supports better sleep quality, which I think is absolutely important. So right now it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with a convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NFL Network. Take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Monday. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here after the Ravens 24-20 loss to the New York Giants. Again, thank you so much for tuning in today, making us your first listen of the day. And this defensive performance, I do want to start because there was a key that I clearly said the whole week. I needed the Ravens to do this if I felt confident in them at least putting up a fight in this one. And it was stopping Saquon Barkley. And I think for Baltimore, the Ravens did relatively well overall. It felt like he wasn't really getting a lot going for most of the day until late. 22 carries for 83 yards and the late touchdown for Saquon Barkley. Could have had 2 touchdowns, but did go down to run the clock out for the Ravens. But the defense overall, I thought, was playing relatively well for most of the game. There were definitely some areas where you would have liked to see certain things happen. I mean, some of the penalties that they committed, the Odafe Owe penalty, the unsportsmanlike conduct was just not necessary whatsoever. That's one of those like boneheaded penalties where you're like, come on, like, is that really worth it? He got into it with Ben Bredesen. It looked like the CBS angles were really weird in this game. I don't know if anyone else noticed, but first of all, the camera angle on that one kickoff was like, I felt like I was spinning. And then you had like some plays not even being like the camera wasn't rotating to the guy. So I don't know what was going on there. But so we didn't really see what happened between Owe and Bredesen. But at the end, we saw Owe kind of hold Bredesen's helmet up like a trophy almost and like throw it down and kick it aside a little bit. He got flagged for 15 yards. You have the Peters pass interference in the end zone late in the game. But to be completely fair to the defense, the Ravens offense gifted the Giants offense a short field on that go-ahead touchdown drive, and obviously again on the drive that the Giants didn't score. But some stats from this game, while the Giants did go 7 of 14 on third down, that's one area we'll talk about where it wasn't great for the defense. Baltimore ended up holding the Giants relatively in check. I mean, they only averaged 3.8 yards per play. A lot of that was because they only averaged 2.7 yards per rush as a team, which I thought was great. I mentioned Saquon's 3.8 yards per carry, but Daniel Jones only had 6 carries for 6 yards. Matt Breida, he lost yards. He had 3 carries for -6 yards. So they came into the week as the 26th ranked rush defense in terms of net yards per attempt. They answered the bell. They did a good job, and I give them credit. Now, the third down defense was not good. Was not good for them. I go back to the Giants series where I believe it was a touchdown drive. It was a touchdown drive. The Ravens had an opportunity to get off the field twice. Well, honestly, more times than that, but twice in 3rd and long situations. Once on a 3rd and 14, and then the very next set of downs, it was a 3rd and 12. The Ravens allow conversions on both of those. I think to get into the 3rd and 14, John Harbaugh declined a penalty that would have made it 4th and 4, if I'm not mistaken. And that, again, I might trust the defense in a 4th and 4 as opposed to a 3rd and 14 because we have seen those 3rd and long situations given up for some of the year. The third down defense has not been spectacular for the Ravens for the entire season. And this is kind of what I was talking about when you were looking at like overreactions early season versus trends. When do you kind of cross that line into overreactions or underreactions become trends? I say after the first month of the year, you start to go into that category. We're a month and a half in right now. Things are absolutely trends. And so the Ravens blowing fourth quarter leads and losses, that is a trend, not an overreaction. The Ravens doing X or Y, third down defense, red zone offense, those are trends, not overreactions that they have to fix. And so Baltimore's defense, I talked about kind of the end of half defense for them last week and for a couple weeks there, but they have to be better in those situations. Now, I do say that if I had to put, like, where do you put the blame for this loss? I'm going more offensively than I am defensively, but it's an effort. It's an offensive effort. It's a defensive effort, special teams effort as well. Coaching effort is also a big thing. We'll get into coaching a bit in the third segment, but the Ravens had so many opportunities to win this game, to put this game away, to add points, to stop the Giants from getting points, etc. And on defense, you look to those third down conversions where if the Ravens get the Giants off the field in that 3rd and 14, they don't get the 7. If they get them off in the 3rd and 12, they don't get the 7. I thought that some players on the defense did play well, though. I mean, there were players. Justin Madubuike played really, really well. I thought Malik Harrison made a couple nice plays. Travis Jones, welcome to the NFL, Travis Jones. He had a sack. Calais Campbell made some plays. Pepe Williams got picked on in coverage a little bit. We saw some picking on by Daniel Jones in that Giants offense on a couple of plays there. But I thought that the Ravens had multiple players play well there, but it's the boneheaded stuff that I think people are getting so upset with. And I'm there. I'm there with you. I mean, if you want to take this from a defensive segment to a special team segment, AJ Klein with a 15-yard penalty for hitting a guy out of bounds, you just can't have that. You can't have those penalties. It's a discipline issue, right? It's all these things combining into one that makes it so disappointing. And for defense in this game, the Ravens defense turned in a decently good effort. Like if the offense had done this or done that, and you can say defense as well. Like it's not one thing. The Giants held the ball for 31 minutes, 52 seconds. The Ravens 28 minutes and 8 seconds. But I go back to the penalties, 10 penalties for 74 yards. The Ravens also were able to get some sacks on Daniel Jones, which was good to see. He had 4 sacks overall. I mentioned Justin Madubuike, who had a sack. Patrick Queen had a sack. Travis Jones and Calais Campbell, those were their 4 sack guys. But the Ravens didn't really do much in terms of turnovers. The Giants only had 1 turnover, and it was technically at the end of the half when Daniel Jones fumbled and Chuck Clark recovered it, and that's how that went. But it just felt like the Ravens had this game, and a couple things both ways turned the tides. And you can and we'll get into this. This will be my transition to the final segment. We can argue and do all this different stuff about this is where they lost the game. That's where they lost the game. And if they did this and if they did that. But the fact of the matter is now Baltimore is a 3-3 football team with their roster, with their coaching staff, and that is what it is. I mean, the Ravens could be a bunch of different records right now. You could argue for a bunch of different records, but the moral of the story is they're 3-3. Their defense has some issues. Their offense has some issues. Their coaching staff has some issues, and we'll talk about just where the Ravens go from here, what some of those issues are, and more coming up in the final segment. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about Prize Picks. And I love fantasy football. I've been doing it for a long time, have a ton of fantasy stock and a ton of players this year. But if you want to have a daily fantasy twist of things, be sure to try Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is super easy to use. And also they have a ton of entries that you can make. And how it works is you pick 2 to 5 players. If they will go score more or less in their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch, including NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 for promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't get to the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. We're back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. We're going to talk now about the Ravens just from a general perspective, because again, as we kind of talked about going into the final segment from the second segment, you can argue the Ravens record, but the moral of the story, the moral of everything they've done so far through 6 weeks is they're 3-3. Could they be 6-0? Sure, they could be 6-0. Could they be 1-5? Yeah, they could be 1-5. But it just feels like there is talent on this roster. Now, do they have talent in every pit? Are there holes on the Ravens roster? Yes, there are. We'll get to those. But the Ravens have a talented quarterback, one of the best in the league in Lamar Jackson. They have talent in multiple different positions. Talent on the roster, I don't think equals a 3-3 football team. Do they need a wide receiver? I think they do. Do they need to get guys like Tyus Bowser and David Ojabo back to help their pass rush? They absolutely do. Do they need depth at other areas? Yeah, they do, right? This is not a perfect football team by any stretch of the imagination, and we know that because they are 3-3. They have had these issues. But now it's time to look in the mirror if you're the Ravens, to do a bit of that soul searching. Baltimore's receivers, and we'll talk about this throughout the week. We'll dedicate more time to it. But I talked about last week how the Ravens should go out there and get DJ Moore. And I know the more realistic option out of the Carolina receivers, when you're talking about DJ Moore versus Robbie Anderson, is Robbie Anderson. But Anderson had a terrible game against the Rams on Sunday and wasn't on the field. I mean, he blew up at I think it was his wide receiver coach. Him and his wide receiver coach got into an argument. He was kicked off the field by his own team. I don't know if the Ravens are going to go for that. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but I don't know if they're going to go for it. So if they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. But I think Baltimore has to look themselves in the mirror and say that, look, I think it was fine for the Ravens to trust their wide receivers. I think that and you can look back at episodes I did. I was very consistent, and I went back and forth sometimes, but I was consistent in saying, yeah, the Ravens do need a veteran wide receiver, and no disrespect whatsoever here, but not like DeMarcus Robinson veteran. Like DeMarcus Robinson can be a role player on a team, on the Ravens, and that's great. But when he's asked to continuously climb the ladder, and all of a sudden now he's your number 2 wide receiver, that's where I think it becomes problematic. The Ravens missed Rashad Bateman. What happens if Bateman has to miss another 2 weeks, another 4 weeks? And then what happens if Devin Duvernay goes down? Where are you looking wide receiver wise? I think this is a time, like if there was ever a time for the Ravens to go out there and invest in a star wide receiver, give up a first or whatnot, it would be now, because the Ravens receivers, they are not helping out Lamar Jackson right now. It is the Mark Andrews show on offense. And it's not like you have right now a Marquise Brown that we were talking a couple years ago about, all right, who are the defenses going to focus on so that Lamar Jackson could just throw to the other guy the whole game, which is kind of what happened, because one guy would get double covered, the other guy would have a big game. Andrews is having big games regardless of who's on him. Like that is what Mark Andrews has grown into. But I just think that they'd be better. They'd be better in the red zone. They'd be better at converting this and that. if they had a star number one wide receiver. Now, I know there are some talks about, what that would do to the salary cap for the Ravens. If what's the point if Greg Roman's going to throw to him 4 times a game, this, that, and the other. I get it, but just the presence of having somebody out there, he's going to get the ball. I feel like he would. I think the Ravens are trying to move that. It feels like Lamar Jackson's trying to move that direction. So I think that it would be worthwhile for them to try that, or just bring in a wide receiver. If it's not DJ Moore, bring in somebody. bring in Odell Beckham to have him. If he's on a November return, bring him in. Then if Will Fuller's the answer, if you do trade for a Robbie Anderson type player. The Ravens, though, in terms of changes, it feels like this is the most pivotal week, 7 days from Monday to Monday, that the Ravens have faced in a little while now, because you're getting your guys back. Some things have not gone your way, and it's disappointing how they haven't gone your way. But we've seen these trends. I think there is a coaching issue. I mean, John Harbaugh has been at the forefront of a lot of these conversations. John Harbaugh is to blame for some of this, right? You can't just put any of these guys on a pedestal and say, oh, it's not this guy's fault whatsoever. It is a team effort. Now, you can assign certain blame to certain guys, percentages, I guess. But this team is undisciplined right now. The coaching, Greg Roman, some of that play calling that we've seen has not been good. Mike McDonald still adjusting. Now, when people talk about change, right now at least, I know there's been a lot of talk about firings. I have been consistent, and I'll stay this way, of saying that I think it'd be too early to fire Mike McDonald in the situation. I think the defense has played better too, so I don't think that is what would happen. I think the Ravens wouldn't fire John Harbaugh till after the season. I think, and you can go way back. You can go back to the offseason for this. I've said that if there was to be a scapegoat in this situation where the Ravens had to make a change and they had to spark something, Greg Roman would be that guy. And that's still my opinion. I think if the Ravens were to make a coaching change, Greg Roman is the first to go. That is what I think will happen. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe something else happens, right? I'm not saying that this is anything that I know or don't know, but I think that, in my personal opinion, what I think would happen is the Ravens would fire Greg Roman in that situation. Now, if they make a change this week, maybe they do. But in that situation, who would get promoted to offensive coordinator? I know there's been a lot of T. Martin. I think it'd be between T. Martin and James Urban. I don't know which one of those guys it would be. Maybe it's Urban because he's been in the system longer. I don't know. But none of that has happened yet, right? For now, it's who's in the building, and that's who it is. But we kind of saw this thing happen in 2019 where the Ravens went through 2 really, really bad losses back to back, and it's a little different this year. But that was 2019. 2019 is not coming back. But I think some of the principles that Eric DeCosta applied in that situation, which was getting rid of Tim Williams, bringing in Josh Bynes and LJ Fort, trading for Marcus Peters, and moving on from Kenny Young in a 5th. Those are the types of moves that can help save a season, bringing in a playmaker like that. And whether this time around, if they make a change, if it's giving up a 1st rounder for somebody, if it's giving up a 5th rounder for somebody and a player, if it's moving on from a couple guys who haven't been performing well, maybe that's what they do. I mean, the Ravens offense, this is a team that fired their offensive coordinator in 2012, 4 games. I think it was 4 games, 4 games for the playoffs. They fire Cam Cameron, bring in Jim Caldwell, and they win the Super Bowl. This is not a team that is completely new to making big changes like that. I just think they have to analyze when is the time to do it. And I think if it's not this week, if they don't do anything this week, I think, again, the reason why I said is this is the most pivotal 7 days for them, Monday to Monday, is because if they lose to Cleveland at home on Sunday, it's disaster. It's absolute disaster. This is a team that should not be below 500 at all. Otherwise, it'd be like a 1-1, 0-1 or 1-2 start is where that's like kind of okay. It's early in the year. But again, these are not overreactions, underreactions. These are becoming real trends that we are seeing right now. So if the Ravens don't do anything this week and then they lose to Cleveland on Sunday, that I think is the worst, like the absolute worst possible thing that can happen to this franchise. We see Marlon Humphrey posting a cryptic tweet after the game about, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again by Albert Einstein. I think he said the quote was by. So it's these things where you have to analyze when the time is right to do certain things, when you have to spark a team. This team, I think, needs a spark. The coaching stuff, the discipline stuff, even the late blown leads, those go back not just to this year. That was a huge part of what happened to the Ravens in 2021, where the defense could not finish. And that was more of a defensive thing. And again, the offense at that point didn't have Lamar Jackson, no Dobbins, no Edwards, no Stanley, et cetera, et cetera. But that defense could not finish late in games, late in the year last year. We are seeing some of those same trends, except they're like moving over a bit to the offense, where the offense second half wise, they're one of the worst second half teams in the NFL right now. That has to change. So there's a lot to dive into. I think this team still has talent. That we're only 6 weeks in. There's a lot of football left. I do want to say that, look, the sky is not completely falling right now, but there are key issues that I think need to be addressed. And if you don't address them and things continue to go wrong, my number one thing, and it has been for years doing this show, is complacency. I do not like the complacency factor of things for any team, any franchise, where you get into a situation where a team makes playoffs and loses in the wild card or loses in the divisional round every year and then goes, all right, this is cool, let's do it again next year. I'd seen growth from Baltimore each and every year in the playoffs, excluding last year because I kind of don't count that year because of injuries. But we saw kind of the trajectory where they lost in the divisional round and then they ended up losing, or they lost in the wild card round, lost in the divisional round, then won in the wild card round, lost in the divisional round. So there was a little growth there, but the complacency factor, they cannot get complacent. If stuff isn't going right, if there is a fix that can happen by some sort of spark somewhere, I think they have to take it. And sometimes those sparks can be franchise altering. Again, we'll talk about what those changes could be throughout the week, but I'm not saying one wide receiver would have changed what happened on Sunday, but it's disappointing nonetheless that I think for a team with such high expectations, they're sitting at 3-3 right now, still technically tied for first place in the AFC North. They technically have the lead in the division because of their tiebreaker with Cincinnati. I think Baltimore definitely still has the potential to be okay, right? We're 6 weeks in. The sky is definitely not falling right now. There are still positives to take away from all three sides of the ball, but you have to clean up on the negatives. That's the number one thing for me. So whether that comes with change in whatever way it comes, a firing, a trade, a signing, just being able to be better, whatever it is, you cannot continue to do these things and expect them to get better with nothing. Something has to give some time. And so we'll see what happens throughout the rest of this week here. Again, pivotal 7 days for the Ravens. But that's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm going to get back in tomorrow. I'll be diving into more about this Ravens team, where they go from here and more. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you right back here tomorrow.